the mission of Voices of Hope really weaves in so perfectly with our mission at Speak Up in helping people tell their true stories and helping people connect. And it's just been such an honor to be involved in this process. Voices of Hope is an organization I feel really passionately about, and I feel really lucky and honored, and I know Matt does too, to play even a small part of it. Sharon and Jeff and Lois, Peter, Evelyn, Matt, and I met for only over 3 weeks. When we started, we were really, this was new to all of us. Matt and I had never done anything like this before, and everybody was just so gracious and willing to work, and what they came up with in this short amount of time is terrific, and I'm excited to present it to you today. Our next speaker is Jeff Israel. Jeff is a Connecticut native, and he grew up in Hartford, although both of his parents are from Germany and are survivors. Jeff is a member at Temple Sinai, right where I live in Newington, woo! And he's a past president there. He serves on the board of directors as well, and he's also on the board of Voices of Hope. Jeff worked at ESPN for 36 years and is now enjoying a well-deserved retirement. He told me he never really uses Yiddish or Jewish phrases, but he does smile when he hears the words to explain someone's social awkwardness, and this is his example. Shlemiel, someone who is always clumsy, a klutz, and Shlemazel, someone who always seems to have bad luck. And then he, in really good teaching style, went on to further clarify, I love this, when the Shlemiel spills his soup, he probably spills it on the Shlemazel. So now we can all use that properly. Thank you, Jeff, and I'm happy to introduce Jeff Israel.
Make sure your mic is good. Ready? All right, here, you do it because you can get the height right. Is that good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Growing up, I always thought it was odd that my parents and my surviving grandparents never really spoke about the Holocaust. And even more odd, we belonged to a synagogue that was made up of German Jews who never spoke about the Holocaust. Of course, this was many years ago. But I'm the proud son of 2 survivors. My mom, who, and her family actually got to travel to America, but not before enduring Kristallnacht and also my grandfather's internment in Buchenwald concentration camp. Surviving on my mother's side was my mom, her father Bernard, mother Henrietta, and his sister Hilda. They endured many things before they left Germany, but my dad's family was not as fortunate. My dad and his family were interned in Theresienstadt and also Auschwitz, where they saw the death of my grandmother Bertha, grandfather Jacob, and 16 of my cousins, aunts, and uncles. But my dad did survive. It was hard for him also. He was in Auschwitz for many months, and they managed to finally come to America. The year is 1968. It's the year that my family decides that we would go to Israel. And we would also visit Italy, Spain, Germany, Switzerland. And I thought maybe this would be a time where I would learn a little bit more about my family and the loss of my family at the hands of the Nazis. While in Israel, we met one of my father's surviving cousins and her son, Nachum. Nachum, I found out later, competed in Israel's first Olympic trip. And he also served in the Israeli army as he fought in the Six-Day War. I thought it was odd again that here we are, family members meeting, and nobody talking about the Holocaust. You know, I didn't know how to ask. I mean, we have the words now, Holocaust and Shoah, but those words really weren't around back then. So it was odd for me to not know how to ask. Don't get me wrong, I took history classes and I knew about Germany somewhat. I knew about World War II and I knew about Hitler. But I never really knew about what happened to the Jews in Germany and 6 million Jews throughout Europe. Well, I'm leaving Israel, and like I said, I don't have any more information on my family's history. But I'm hoping that when we get to Germany, I'd learn a lot more. So we're off to Italy, and we're discovering the different routes around Rome, walking the streets, and all of a sudden, a street vendor approaches us and looks at my dad and says, "Landsman." It's a word that I was familiar with, a Yiddish word that said someone from the same area. And I noticed him looking at my dad's left arm. Dad had received a tattoo on his left arm while in Auschwitz. And the man approached my father, and he rolled up his sleeve on his left arm, and they both looked at their numbers, and they were talking. But again, I wasn't really getting the gist of what was going on, other than it seemed like some type of a brotherhood. Well, finally, I had a little bit more information on my family's history, and later that day, I asked my dad, I said, "Dad, how did you get that tattoo? Those numbers, A1605. And he told me while he was in Auschwitz that an SS soldier pierced his skin with a needle and then rubbed indelible ink throughout his arm, his bleeding arm. And he told me that his arm had swollen twice its size and took many weeks before it was normal again. He also said that many people who went through the same process died from blood poisoning. So now we're on to Switzerland, but not before a one-day stopover in Germany. And I'm thinking, one day in Germany, how am I going to learn about my parents and what they went through? But I held off, and we traveled, and we got to Frankfurt. And it was early in the morning, and I can remember that it was very cloudy out, and it was very misty. It was almost setting me up for a very somber trip to my parents' hometowns. And my dad mentioned a story that while he was in Auschwitz, he never saw a bird fly over. Even more chilling was that there were days that he never saw the sun because of the clouds of smoke coming from the crematorium smokestacks. Very sad. The first town we were to go to is my mom's hometown of Großen-Linden. And it was a nice-sized town. We drove through, and Mom pointed out the Jewish cemetery, the house she had lived in. We got to go inside of that house. And also, she pointed out a building that had a couple of rooms in it. They called it the firehouse. It wasn't really the firehouse we know of today with the big trucks and all. They kept firefighting equipment in there. But she said that her mom, and 20 other women from surrounding towns were gathered up and herded into this building the morning before Kristallnacht. So it was at that point where I met a family called the Webbers. Mom introduced us to them, and I found out that the grandfather had actually helped my grandparents put away things that they would need and pack them off so when they got to America, they could start their new life. We then went to my dad's hometown of Dilish. And it was about an hour's drive from Gross and Linden. It seemed like a much longer drive because we went through fields of corn and hay. And if we had blinked, we would have missed the town. It was that small. And the reason I bring this up is because my dad used to poke fun at my mom and say how she was a country girl. Well, there was one road going into Dilish and out of Dilish. So much for my mom being the country girl and my dad being the big country guy. And as I work my way through this and the trip ends, I'm thinking, well, I've learned a little bit about my family's past, and over the years I'll be learning a lot more. So I'm thankful to have had my parents and to listen to their stories after many years of living with them. Thank you.